The human princess took command in war, silencing every doubt. Princess Alara stood at the central observation window, her hands resting lightly on the polished railing, her eyes following the patterns of distant constellations. She had grown up hearing stories of the galaxy's wonders, but never in her childhood had she imagined that one day she would command fleets, make decisions that could save millions, and face challenges that would test every skill she had. Now, as the youngest member of the House of Tarsize, she carried responsibilities that many adults would have hesitated to accept. Her mind wandered briefly to her childhood on the planet Leora, a place where humans had always been considered small, fragile, and insignificant by the larger races of the galaxy. Towering Virelians had laughed at the idea of a human princess leading soldiers into space. Yet the very frailty others saw in humans had always been a secret strength. While larger races relied on sheer power, humans relied on intellect, teamwork, creativity, and the ability to adapt in ways no other species could. Alara had learned this early, and she had made it her mission to prove it, not through confrontation or anger, but through demonstration. The calm of the moment was broken by the sharp tone of the ship's communications officer. "Princess Alara," she said, turning toward her with a digital tablet in hand, "incoming transmission from the Council of Worlds. It's urgent." Alara took the tablet, scanning the message quickly. The Council's message was short and precise, yet its implications were enormous. The Virelians, a species known for their dominance and strict hierarchy, were moving to seize control of several human colonies located in the Helios cluster. The colonies were small, scattered, and poorly defended, but they were essential. Losing them would mean not just territory, but morale, resources, and influence. She felt a brief pang of tension, but she did not allow it to show. Instead, she calmly handed the tablet back to the officer and addressed the bridge crew. "We have a challenge ahead of us," she said, her voice steady. "The Virelians believe they are stronger. Let's show them that strength alone is never enough." Some of the officers exchanged uneasy glances. Doubt had a tendency to linger on human bridges, even in times of necessity. Many of them were older, trained in traditional warfare, and hesitant to follow the decisions of someone so young. But Alara had always known that true leadership was not about age or physical might. It was about vision, clarity, and the courage to act when others hesitated. She walked down the bridge aisle, stopping at each station to speak quietly to the crew members. At the navigation console, she adjusted their route to use the gravitational pull of a nearby binary star system, creating a natural cover that the Virelians would not expect. At the engineering section, she suggested minor but strategic adjustments to the ship's shields, allowing them to fluctuate in unpredictable patterns that could confuse enemy sensors. At communications, she instructed the team to intercept and decode Virelian messages, seeking clues about their tactics before the first encounter. As she moved back to the center of the bridge, Alara felt the familiar mix of excitement and focus that always accompanied her when the stakes were high. There was no fear here, only the challenge of thinking faster, planning smarter, and ensuring that her people had the upper hand. Humans had a long history of turning apparent weaknesses into victories, and this would be no different. Hours passed as the fleet of human ships gathered, moving silently through the void of space. The Aurelia led the formation, its sleek design reflecting the starlight, while smaller support vessels flanked it in precise patterns. Every human on board felt the tension, but also a quiet confidence. They had been trained, yes, but more importantly, they had a leader who could think several steps ahead, anticipating the moves of a far larger and more intimidating opponent. When the first scout ships of the Virelians appeared on the long-range sensors, the bridge crew stiffened. The Virelians were imposing even in their scout vessels, with jagged, angular designs that seemed to radiate aggression. But Alara's mind was already working, calculating angles, predicting movements, and considering the best use of the resources available. She gave her first command, simple but precise. Deploy the decoy drones in a sweeping pattern. Let them think the fleet is larger than it is. The crew moved swiftly, trusting her judgment, and soon the sensors were filled with dozens of blips that suggested a massive armada. The Virelians' scanners would take minutes to differentiate the decoys from real ships, a crucial window of opportunity. Minutes later, the Virelian fleet appeared fully from hyperspace, its long hulls stretching across the sensors like dark fingers reaching into the void. There was a moment of collective tension on the bridge as the enemy assessed their target. But Alara remained calm, her eyes scanning the data streams, her mind mapping every possible move. "Princess," said one of the senior officers hesitantly, "they outnumber us at least 3-1. Are you certain?" Alara interrupted him gently but firmly. "I am certain. They expect a head-on confrontation. That is not what we will give them. Humans are clever, adaptable, and unpredictable. They rely on size. We rely on wit. Trust in that." The Virelians advanced, but the human fleet moved with precision, every ship following subtle patterns and maneuvers designed to confuse the enemy sensors. The decoy drones darted in and out, creating false signatures, while the main fleet altered course in ways that would be impossible for the Virelians to track without risking collision. As the engagement unfolded, Alara observed quietly. She did not shout orders unnecessarily. She allowed her crew to act, trusting their skills while monitoring the overall strategy. Each movement was calculated, every action deliberate. By the time the Virelians realized that the humans were not reacting as expected, it was already too late. Their scouts reported anomalies, imaginary ships, sudden shifts in fleet positioning, and interference in their sensor readings. The Virelians hesitated, confused by what seemed like impossible maneuvers. Alara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This was the strength of humanity, the ability to turn limitations into advantage, to use intelligence, coordination, and creativity to overcome sheer physical power. She thought of her ancestors who had tamed planets, built civilizations from scratch, and survived challenges that would have crushed larger species. Today, they would do it again. Hours passed as the Virelian fleet struggled to adapt. Each time they attempted a direct approach, they encountered obstacles carefully placed by the humans. Shields shifted, decoys moved, communications misled, and yet the human fleet remained unharmed. Crew members who had doubted the princess's abilities now looked at her with awe, understanding that leadership was not about issuing commands for brute strength, but about seeing patterns and possibilities that others missed. By the time the engagement drew to a natural pause, the Virelians had retreated just beyond long-range sensor capabilities. They had not been defeated, not yet, but they had been stopped. And more importantly, they had been forced to acknowledge that humans were not as easy to intimidate as they had believed. Alara stood silently, watching the retreating fleet, and allowed herself a moment of reflection. Victory in this first encounter was not about destruction or conquest. It was about proving a point. Humans were not weak. Humans were not naive. Humans were capable of brilliance that even the strongest species could underestimate. On the bridge, the crew began to relax, their tension giving way to pride. Alara moved among them, offering quiet words of encouragement and recognition. Each individual had played a role, and she made sure they knew it. Leadership, she believed, was not about taking all the credit, but about inspiring others to rise to their potential. As the stars continued to shimmer outside the observation window, Alara considered the next steps. The Virelians would regroup, no doubt, and a larger challenge awaited, but she welcomed it. Each obstacle was an opportunity to demonstrate human ingenuity, courage, and determination. She knew that with careful planning, teamwork, and trust in her people, they could overcome any threat, even one that seemed insurmountable at first glance. The princess allowed herself one more glance at the stars. They were beautiful, distant, and full of possibility. And in those endless lights, she saw the future of humanity, a future where they would not merely survive, but thrive, proving to the galaxy that human courage, intelligence, and heart were forces to be reckoned with. Alara returned to her command chair, her mind already mapping out strategies, analyzing patterns, and preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. She was not just a princess. She was a leader, a thinker, a human who refused to be underestimated. And as the Aurelia and her fleet sailed into the depths of space, she knew that every doubt cast upon her, every whisper of disbelief, would be silenced by the proof of what humans could achieve. The stars waited, vast and unyielding, but Princess Alara had made her choice. Humans would face the galaxy with confidence, and under her command, no challenge would be too great, no opponent too intimidating. The first steps of this journey had been taken, and already the galaxy had begun to notice that something remarkable was happening. And so, as the Aurelia led its fleet toward the Helios cluster, the Princess of Humanity prepared for the next stage of the challenge, determined to prove that intelligence, courage, and ingenuity could accomplish what sheer power alone could not. She was ready. Humanity was ready. The galaxy would soon learn to pay attention. The Viorlian fleet had pulled back into deep space, its enormous ships gliding through the void like shadows over water. On the bridge of the lead vessel, Commander Vorik, a towering figure even among his kind, scowled at the human maneuvers that had slowed his advance. His sensors had picked up their retreat, but it was no simple withdrawal. Something about the humans made him uneasy. They had not fled in panic. They had adapted, responded, and maneuvered with skill that was unexpected. "They are clever," he said to his second-in-command, a sleek Viorlian with scaled forearms glinting under the control panels. "They are too clever for their size. They anticipate our moves. How can a species so small and apparently weak possess such insight?" "They rely on unpredictability, Commander," replied his second-in-command. "They do not fight like others. Perhaps that is why their fleets seem alive, moving almost of their own will." Vorik growled softly, frustration rumbling in his chest. He had faced countless species across the galaxy, but humans were unique. They seemed fragile, but their minds worked in ways no brute force could predict. "Prepare a counter," he said. "We will not allow them to continue. They must understand that size and strength matter in war." Meanwhile, aboard the human starship Aurelia, Princess Alara stood quietly on the bridge, reviewing sensor data with a calm and focused expression. The initial encounter had gone exactly as she hoped. The humans had avoided direct conflict while demonstrating their ability to control the engagement. Yet she knew the Viorlians would learn from this experience. They would adapt, and so must she. "Princess," said Lieutenant Merrick, one of her senior officers, "the Viorlians have retreated, but they are not far. They may return with a larger fleet, better prepared to counter our maneuvers." Alara nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. "That is exactly what I expect. And that is why we will continue to prepare. Humans do not rely on luck or fear. We rely on observation, anticipation, and cooperation. Let them think they understand us. They do not." The fleet moved deeper into the Helios cluster, a region of space filled with asteroids, gas clouds, and magnetic fields. It was a challenging environment for any fleet, but Alara saw it as an opportunity. She instructed her navigators to plot courses that would maximize the terrain's advantage, using natural obstacles to complicate the Viorlian sensors. Small drones were deployed to test and map the cluster, while communications teams worked to intercept signals from the enemy. Every human on board understood their role. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were thinkers, innovators, and problem solvers. Night aboard the Aurelia, or what passed for night in the artificial light of the ship, was filled with quiet preparation. Alara spent hours in the strategy room, mapping possible enemy approaches and creating contingency plans. The princess's mind was always active, analyzing patterns and predicting responses. She understood the value of patience. Sometimes the best victories were won not in the heat of battle, but in the careful orchestration of events before the fight began. Days passed, and the Viorlians did not make a direct approach. Instead, they seemed to observe, testing and probing the human fleet with small scout ships. Each attempt was met with clever responses: drones that created false signals, maneuvers that redirected the Viorlians, sensors, and communication intercepts that allowed humans to anticipate and neutralize every probe. On the bridge, crew members began to see a pattern. The humans were not merely defending, they were teaching their opponent that intelligence could shape reality itself. Lieutenant Merrick looked at Princess Alara with admiration. "You are showing them something they cannot ignore," he said quietly. Alara smiled, a hint of warmth breaking through her usually calm demeanor. "No, Merrick, we are showing ourselves what we can do. The Viorlians are only part of the lesson. Humans are capable of far more than anyone believes." During this time, Alara also worked to maintain morale across the fleet. She visited the smaller ships, speaking with engineers, navigators, and scientists, listening to their concerns and encouraging innovative solutions. She encouraged small competitions among teams to devise new strategies for evading detection, optimizing energy use, and analyzing enemy patterns. Every small success built confidence, and soon the fleet felt less like a collection of vessels and more like a single, cohesive organism operating in perfect harmony. The turning point came when the Violians attempted a coordinated scan of the human fleet using a new formation designed to trap and isolate ships. Alara had anticipated this and had already prepared a response. Using a combination of sensor-reflecting drones and subtle shifts in the fleet's positions, she created the illusion that the humans were scattered, vulnerable, and disorganized. When the Violian scouts moved in for the supposed advantage, they found themselves navigating through confusing sensor readings and unexpected obstacles. One by one, their signals were misdirected, leading them into empty regions of space, while the real human ships moved with silent precision behind them. It was a demonstration of patience, foresight, and careful planning, the essence of human ingenuity. Vorik watched from his command center as reports came in. He could not comprehend how a species so small could manipulate sensors, predict movements, and turn natural hazards to their advantage. "They are thinking in ways we cannot anticipate," he said, voice tight with frustration. "This is not brute strength, it is something else, something far more dangerous." Meanwhile, Alara remained calm. She did not celebrate the minor victories, nor did she underestimate the enemy. She knew that the Violians would adapt eventually, and the next encounter would be even more challenging. But she also knew that each small triumph built confidence in her people and reinforced the lesson that humans could achieve what others thought impossible. To maintain an edge, Alara called a meeting with her chief engineers and strategists. They brainstormed methods for utilizing the natural environment of the Helios cluster more effectively, including using magnetic storms to create sensor distortions and small asteroids as mobile shields. Engineers designed drones that could alter the reflection of energy beams, making it appear as though ships were moving in ways they were not. Every human contribution was valued, every idea considered. In this collaboration, humans found strength not in individual power, but in collective intelligence. The fleet's cohesion grew, and with it, the confidence of each crew member. They practiced new maneuvers in simulated scenarios, preparing for the moment when the Violians would make their decisive move. And when that moment finally came, humans would be ready, not with overwhelming force, but with precision, creativity, and the unity that had always defined them. It was during one quiet observation shift that Alara reflected on the nature of her challenge. Leadership was never just about giving orders. It was about understanding people, motivating them, and allowing them to see their own potential. The Violians might be stronger physically, but humans had something far more powerful: the ability to think, adapt, and cooperate in ways no one else could. And as the stars stretched endlessly beyond the observation window, Alara made a silent promise. She would lead her people not just to survive, but to thrive, to show the galaxy that humans were not weak or insignificant. They were clever, resourceful, and united, and under her guidance they would face the greatest challenges with confidence. Days turned into nights, or what counted as nights aboard the fleet, and the Violians' presence remained a constant, looming shadow. Yet the humans did not fear it. They studied it, learned from it, and prepared for the day when they would need to act decisively. Each crew member had come to understand that their strength lay not in fighting, but in thinking, observing, and acting with precision. Finally, the Violians made their move. A fleet larger than any previous formation appeared on long-range sensors, moving with the intent of encircling the human fleet. But the humans were ready. Princess Alara had orchestrated a response that relied on misdirection, anticipation, and the clever use of their environment. Drones shifted positions, sensor readings were manipulated, and the human ships moved as one, flowing through the asteroid fields with coordination that seemed impossible. As the fleets approached, it became clear that the Violians were confused. They attempted to close in, but the humans were always one step ahead, exploiting the natural features of the cluster and the intelligence of their own crew. What had seemed like a disadvantage, the humans' smaller size, the limited number of ships, became a source of agility, speed, and adaptability. For the Violians, the encounter was both frustrating and enlightening. They had underestimated humans, assuming that size and strength dictated the outcome of any engagement. But humans had demonstrated that cleverness, coordination, and innovation were forces that could change the balance entirely. On the bridge of the Aurelia, Princess Alara watched the unfolding maneuvers with quiet satisfaction. Her plan was working. Not a single ship had been endangered. Every crew member knew their role and executed it flawlessly. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that each small success would ripple through the fleet, reinforcing the lesson that humans were capable beyond what others imagined. As the day ended, or what passed for day aboard the fleet, the humans held their positions. The Violians retreated once more, though they would not abandon their ambitions entirely. They had been challenged, outmaneuvered, and forced to respect the ingenuity of a species they had considered insignificant. And for Princess Alara, the lesson was clear. Humans were more than their size or appearance. They were thinkers, innovators, and collaborators, and under her command they would continue to prove that no challenge, no matter how daunting, was beyond their reach. The stars outside twinkled, infinite and eternal, but humanity had carved a place among them, not through force, but through brilliance, courage, and unity. And Princess Alara knew that the greatest victories were not won by those who struck first or hardest, but by those who understood, adapted, and inspired. In the silent expanse of space, humans had shown their strength in a way the galaxy would not soon forget. And the princess, quiet but determined, prepared for the next stage of the challenge, ready to demonstrate that human courage and ingenuity could overcome any obstacle, silence every doubt, and shine brighter than any star. The Helios cluster had become a place of quiet tension. The human fleet holding its position like a sentinel in the endless darkness. Princess Alara walked along the observation deck of the Aurelia, her eyes tracing the slow drift of asteroids and gas clouds, and her mind calculating every possibility. The Violians had withdrawn twice, but Alara knew better than to think the challenge was over. Each retreat was a prelude to something larger, a pause before they struck with more force. The fleet had learned to move as one, anticipating obstacles, communicating silently through shared training and understanding, yet the real test was still to come. "Princess," said Lieutenant Merrick, joining her at the observation window, "we've intercepted Violian communications. They are reorganizing. It looks like they intend to test us with a coordinated effort, multiple squads approaching from different angles simultaneously." Alara did not flinch. She had expected this. "Good," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Then we will give them something unexpected." She turned to face Merrick, her eyes firm and unwavering. "Humans are clever because we can see what others cannot. They think they are planning to trap us, but we will make the cluster work for us. Every asteroid, every magnetic field, every cloud is part of our strategy. They will not see what is coming." Over the next few hours, the fleet moved like a living organism, shifting and adjusting in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Engineers adjusted energy shields to pulse unpredictably, creating patterns that confused enemy sensors. Navigators calculated courses that allowed the ships to use the cluster's natural features to their advantage. Communications officers intercepted Violian transmissions, sending signals designed to mislead and delay their response. Princess Alara walked through the corridors of the Aurelia, speaking quietly to small groups of crew members, checking on their progress, offering encouragement, and asking questions that made them think beyond the immediate task. "What if we change the timing of the shield pulses by half a second?" she asked one of the engineers. "How would that affect sensor readings?" The engineer paused, then nodded slowly. "It could make our ships appear to shift position even when they're stationary. It would confuse the Violian scanners." "Exactly," Alara said with a small smile. "We are not just reacting, we are controlling the situation. Humans do not wait for chance, we create it." By the time the Violian squads arrived, the human fleet was ready. From long-range sensors, it seemed as though the humans were scattered and vulnerable, a perfect opportunity for the Violians to advance. But appearances were deceptive. Every ship was positioned intentionally, every maneuver part of a larger, intricate pattern designed to confuse, redirect, and neutralize the enemy's advantage. The first squad approached from the northern sector of the cluster. They moved quickly, expecting a direct confrontation, but the humans had already anticipated their path. Drones positioned among the asteroids projected false energy signatures, giving the illusion of ships where none existed. When the Violians adjusted course, they found themselves navigating through dense fields of mineral-rich clouds, which distorted their sensors further. The humans had no need for aggression. They had created confusion, delay, and opportunity. Princess Alara observed the unfolding situation from the bridge of the Orcs, her calm presence a steady anchor for the crew. She made small adjustments here and there, shifting the fleet slightly, opening new paths through the cluster, and sending decoy signals that suggested the humans were retreating. The Virelians, expecting panic, found strategy instead. Meanwhile, another Virelian squad attempted an approach from the opposite side. Sensors indicated that the humans were dispersed, isolated, and vulnerable. But again, Alara had anticipated the move. The fleet shifted silently, maneuvering through a magnetic anomaly that altered sensor readings. Ships that had seemed distant suddenly appeared in new positions, creating the illusion of a larger fleet than actually existed. It was a demonstration of human creativity and foresight, something the Virelians had not encountered before. Lieutenant Merrick turned to the princess, a mixture of awe and relief on his face. "They are falling for it," he said softly. "Every squad is being guided exactly where we want them. It's incredible." Alara nodded without taking her eyes from the display. "It is not magic, it is understanding. Humans have the ability to see patterns, to predict outcomes, and to adapt faster than anyone expects. That is our true power." As the engagement continued, the Virelians realized that they were being led into a carefully orchestrated maze. Each maneuver they made was countered not by force, but by strategy. Energy fields were redirected, sensor readings distorted, and every attempt to coordinate an attack was subtly thwarted. They were learning, too late, that intelligence and planning could outweigh size and strength. Princess Alara allowed herself a moment to reflect. She knew that victory in the larger sense would not come from overwhelming force. It would come from patience, observation, and the careful orchestration of events. The human fleet was smaller, yes, but it moved as a single, cohesive entity, each ship aware of its role and the broader plan. Hours passed, and the Virelians began to withdraw, confused and frustrated. They had expected to confront weakness and disorganization, but they found foresight and unity. And though they were still a formidable opponent, the humans had proven that they could face a threat larger and stronger without fear. On the Orcs, Princess Alara addressed her crew quietly but firmly. "This is not the end. The Virelians will return and they will try again. But remember what we have learned. We are stronger than we seem. Every challenge is an opportunity. Every problem has a solution if we look for it. Humans are capable of brilliance because we do not rely on what is given, we create what is needed." The crew absorbed her words, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. They had already faced what seemed impossible and had emerged not only unscathed but confident. Under Princess Alara's guidance, they had discovered the value of foresight, patience, and intelligence. Even in the quiet moments between engagements, Alara continued to lead by example. She worked closely with strategists to simulate possible future encounters, asking probing questions that encouraged creative thinking. She encouraged collaboration among teams, valuing every idea and demonstrating that leadership was not about giving orders, but about inspiring others to reach their full potential. When night fell across the artificial lights of the fleet, the humans did not rest completely. Instead, they trained, experimented, and prepared. They explored ways to enhance communication, improve sensor efficiency, and find new ways to move through the cluster without detection. Each day strengthened not only the fleet's capabilities but the confidence of its crew. Princess Alara often reflected on the lessons of the past encounters. Leadership was not about imposing will through fear or authority. It was about guiding, inspiring, and enabling others to see their own strengths. The Virelians had underestimated humanity, assuming that size and aggression dictated the outcome of conflicts. But humans had demonstrated that intelligence, adaptability, and unity could overcome almost any challenge. The true turning point came when the Virelians attempted a coordinated encirclement. This time, multiple fleets moved simultaneously, aiming to cut off human escape routes and force them into disadvantageous positions. The Virelians believed they had the upper hand, but Princess Alara had foreseen this. She had devised a strategy that used the environment to its fullest. Asteroids and gas clouds were employed as natural shields. Magnetic anomalies created false sensor readings, and decoy drones led the Virelians into patterns that mirrored human formations. The fleet moved as one, shifting silently and unpredictably, guiding the enemy into areas where their sensors failed and where humans could control every outcome. From the bridge of the Oralia, Alara observed the precision with which her fleet executed the plan. Every crew member knew their role, anticipated the next move, and adjusted accordingly. Humans were not merely reacting, they were shaping the battle itself. The Virelians, despite their strength, began to falter. Their movements became hesitant, their formations disrupted by the humans' clever use of the environment. For the first time, they realized that raw power alone was insufficient. They were facing a species that could think, adapt, and outmaneuver them without ever striking a single blow. Alara allowed herself a small smile. She did not rejoice in the confusion of the Virelians. Instead, she marveled at the brilliance of her crew. Humans had demonstrated ingenuity, teamwork, and foresight. They had taken what others considered weakness and turned it into a decisive advantage. By the time the Virelians retreated once more, the human fleet remained intact, confident, and stronger than ever. Each crew member had contributed to the success, and the lessons learned would shape future engagements. Princess Alara knew that the true measure of this encounter was not the immediate outcome, but the growth it had inspired. Humans had learned to trust in their abilities, to cooperate in ways that maximized potential, and to lead with intelligence and vision. As the fleet regrouped, Alara spoke to her crew one final time for the day. "We have faced a challenge that many believed would overwhelm us. We have shown that humans can rise above expectation. But this is only the beginning. The galaxy is vast, and there will be other tests, other threats. Remember what we have learned: intelligence, unity, and courage are our greatest strengths. We are not just surviving, we are proving that humans can lead, innovate, and shine brighter than any star." The crew absorbed her words, feeling a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. They had faced a formidable enemy and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. And at the center of it all, Princess Alara had guided them not with fear, but with vision, patience, and an unwavering belief in what humans could achieve. In the vast silence of the Helios cluster, humans had carved a path not through aggression, but through ingenuity. They had faced a species larger, stronger, and more experienced, and they had proven that intelligence, teamwork, and courage could overcome even the most daunting challenges. And as the stars glittered outside, Princess Alara looked forward to the future, ready to face whatever came next, confident that humanity would continue to rise, inspire, and prevail. The Helios cluster had grown quiet, but Princess Alara knew that silence in space was never permanent. The Virelians were retreating, yes, but they would return. Each previous encounter had taught her that patience, observation, and preparation were as important as action. The humans were ready, not to fight through brute force, but to demonstrate what humanity could do when guided by intelligence, ingenuity, and cooperation. Alara walked the observation deck of the Oralia, hands resting lightly on the railing, eyes tracing the paths of distant asteroids and drifting clouds of gas. The cluster's natural obstacles had become allies. She envisioned a series of maneuvers that would use every asteroid, every magnetic field, and every cloud of charged particles to create a network of hidden pathways, illusions, and strategic advantages. This was her battlefield, not merely the void of space, but the complex environment she could manipulate with foresight and planning. "Princess," Lieutenant Merrick approached, carrying the latest sensor readings, "we've detected Virelian activity at the edge of the cluster. It seems they are attempting to organize a coordinated attack, perhaps anticipating the patterns we've used before." Alara nodded, her face calm but determined. "Good, then it is time for the next step. Humans do not wait for opportunity, we create it. Every move they make can be anticipated, every path we take can guide them where we want. Let the cluster become our advantage, not theirs." She convened her senior officers in the strategy room, a space filled with holographic projections of ships, asteroids, and energy fields. "We will use the Virelians' own expectations against them," she explained. "They believe they understand strategy, but they are bound by assumptions. We will move in ways they cannot predict, using obstacles, misdirection, and timing to control the flow of engagement. Every ship has a role, every maneuver contributes to the larger plan." The officers, already impressed by her earlier strategies, listened intently. They trusted her judgment completely, not out of obligation, but because she had proven time and again that her plans were precise, adaptable, and effective. Alara was young, yes, but her mind worked with clarity and vision far beyond her years. The first wave of Viorlian ships appeared, their angular hulls cutting through the void like dark knives. They moved with confidence, expecting the human fleet to scatter, retreat, or panic. But the humans did none of those things. They moved as one, guided by the intricate plan Alara had orchestrated. Decoy drones darted through the cluster, creating false signatures that suggested humans were retreating toward a trap. The Viorlians, seeing what appeared to be isolated ships and weak points, advanced eagerly, unaware that the humans had anticipated their moves. Alara watched the displays, monitoring the fleet's positions and the Viorlians' reactions. With a subtle command, she shifted the human formation, allowing asteroids to obscure key positions, while magnetic anomalies disrupted enemy sensors. Energy shields pulsed in carefully timed intervals, creating illusions of movement that misled the Viorlians into believing they had found openings. The enemy fleet pressed on, each squad maneuvering as if guided by instinct, yet every step brought them further into the carefully prepared web of strategy. Alara's mind moved faster than any sensor could track. She calculated angles, timing, and trajectories with precision, ensuring that every human vessel played its part flawlessly. The Viorlians, despite their strength, began to falter. Their scanners reported contradictory signals. What appeared to be gaps and weaknesses were empty space. Their coordinated movements became hesitant, disrupted by the humans' clever use of the environment. Each step they took was predicted, anticipated, and gently guided by the humans, who used intelligence, patience, and foresight as their weapons. Lieutenant Merrick turned to Alara, awe in his voice. "Princess, this is beyond anything I imagined. They think they are in control, but every move they make has been guided by us. They cannot see it." Alara smiled quietly. "That is the essence of human strength. We do not rely on power alone. We rely on observation, understanding, and collaboration. Let them believe they are the hunters. We are the architects." Hours passed as the Viorlian fleet continued to advance into the intricate network of the cluster. Each attempt to gain advantage was met with a subtle, non-violent counter. Paths blocked by dense clouds, sensors misled by decoys, and movements timed to perfection. The humans were not just surviving, they were shaping the battle without ever needing to engage in direct conflict. At the heart of the cluster, Alara enacted the final stage of her plan. She directed small groups of ships to shift positions in a pattern that, to an external observer, appeared chaotic. In reality, the pattern created a network of false leads, guiding the Viorlians into regions where sensor readings were scrambled and navigation became difficult. It was a demonstration of patience, precision, and intelligence, and it worked flawlessly. The Viorlians, realizing too late that they had been led into a carefully controlled situation, began to retreat. Their formations were disrupted, their plans thwarted, and their confidence shaken. They had underestimated the humans, assuming that strength and size dictated the outcome of any engagement. But the humans had shown that intelligence, coordination, and foresight could achieve far more. Princess Alara allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She did not celebrate the enemy's confusion. Instead, she marveled at the brilliance of her crew. Every individual had contributed, every role had been executed with precision, and together they had demonstrated the extraordinary potential of humanity. The fleet regrouped at a central position in the cluster, energy levels optimal, crew members alert but calm. Alara addressed them quietly, her voice steady and inspiring. "Today we have proven something important. Humans are not small, weak, or insignificant. We are thinkers, innovators, and collaborators. We have faced a challenge that many believed would overwhelm us, and we have risen above expectation. The galaxy will take note, not because we fought with brute force, but because we acted with intelligence, patience, and unity." The crew absorbed her words, feeling a deep sense of pride. They had faced a formidable opponent and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Under Alara's guidance, they had turned apparent weakness into advantage, proving that humans could achieve what others thought impossible. Alara did not allow herself to rest for long. She knew the Viorlians would observe, adapt, and perhaps return in the future. Leadership required constant vigilance, foresight, and the ability to inspire others to reach their potential. She worked with her officers to develop plans for the next stages, considering not only tactical maneuvers, but ways to continue improving human capabilities. Small moments of innovation arose, even in the quiet periods between encounters. Engineers devised new ways to use asteroids as shields. Communications officers developed faster methods of sending encrypted messages, and navigators experimented with routes through gravitational anomalies. Every idea was encouraged, every contribution valued. Alara understood that human strength lay not in any single individual, but in the collective intelligence and creativity of the group. As the stars twinkled beyond the observation windows, Alara allowed herself a moment to reflect. Humanity had faced a challenge larger and stronger than itself, yet it had adapted, collaborated, and prevailed without resorting to aggression. It was a triumph of intellect, courage, and unity, the essence of what she believed humans were capable of. The Viorlians, watching from afar, were forced to acknowledge the unexpected. Humans were not simply small and fragile. They were clever, adaptable, and capable of orchestrating situations in ways the larger species could not predict. They had learned that assumptions based on size, strength, and appearance could be dangerously misleading. For the human fleet, the sense of accomplishment was profound. Crew members who had doubted their own abilities now saw clearly what they could achieve. They had not only survived, but they had taken control of the situation in ways that demonstrated the true potential of human ingenuity. Princess Alara gathered her officers once more, reviewing the data from the final encounter. "We have done more than defend our colonies," she said. "We have proven a principle that intelligence, collaboration, and foresight can achieve what force alone cannot. Remember this. Let it guide our actions in the future. We are capable of more than we imagine, and the galaxy will have to respect that fact." The officers nodded, their confidence renewed. They had witnessed the power of careful planning, observation, and cooperation. They understood that under Alara's guidance, humanity could face any challenge with creativity and determination. As the fleet sailed on through the Helios cluster, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, reflecting the spirit of a people who had overcome doubt, fear, and underestimation. Humans had shown that true strength was not measured by size or aggression, but by intelligence, adaptability, and unity. Princess Alara returned to the observation deck, standing quietly as the fleet moved smoothly through the void. She thought of the challenges ahead, of the countless stars and unknown worlds still to encounter, and she felt a sense of resolve. Humans were ready, not just to survive, but to thrive. They were capable of brilliance that no one could ignore. In that moment, she knew that the lesson would spread far beyond the Helios cluster. Humans would continue to prove themselves, not through violence, but through ingenuity, courage, and collaboration. And under her command, every doubt cast upon humanity would be silenced, replaced by recognition, respect, and admiration. The stars stretched endlessly into the void, yet humanity had carved a path among them, not with aggression, but with brilliance. Princess Alara, young but wise beyond her years, had guided her people to a victory of intellect, unity, and vision. The Viorlians had learned that humans were not to be underestimated, and the galaxy had begun to take notice. And as the fleet moved onward, the humans knew one truth above all. They were clever, they were united, and with leaders like Alara, they could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and rise to meet the stars with courage and confidence. Humanity had proven, once and for all, that strength was not only measured in power, but in thought, heart, and the ability to turn every limitation into an advantage. The future awaited, vast and full of possibility, and Princess Alara knew that with the spirit of humanity guiding the way, no challenge would be too great, no opponent too formidable, and no doubt too strong to silence. The human princess took command in war, silencing every doubt.